The story is about a man named Charles Shine, who is an advertising executive living in Chicago. One day, he forgets to buy a train ticket and is about to be kicked off the train when a woman named Lucinda Harris comes to his rescue and pays for his ticket. They start chatting and find out they are both married, but they still enjoy each other's company. Charles is having a tough time at work, and his daughter is suffering from type 1 diabetes, so he's trying to juggle a lot of responsibilities. Lucinda is a financial advisor at a company called Avery Price, and she's also struggling with her marriage as her husband is always busy. Despite knowing that they are both married, Charles and Lucinda continue to meet up and enjoy each other's company. They talk about their lives, their jobs, and their families. Charles even learns more about Lucinda by looking up her profile on her company's website. It's a complex story with lots of ups and downs, but ultimately, it's about two people connecting in a difficult situation and finding comfort in each other's company. One night, Charles is startled awake by the alarm on his daughter's monitor. In a rush, he hurries to her room and discovers she's having a medical emergency. He urgently contacts his wife, who quickly administers necessary medical care. The next day, during lunch with Lucinda, Charles tells her about his daughter's health struggles. He shares the financial sacrifices they've made, including mortgaging their home for her dialysis machine. Charles reveals they've been saving for an expensive but highly effective medication, eagerly awaiting its release. Charles, informing his wife he'll be home late due to work, ends up at a bar with Lucinda. As they share a moment, he kisses her, and their interaction intensifies outside the bar. However, Lucinda shortly calls off their plans while they search for a hotel. Though she expresses hesitation, an alluring hotel across the street changes their minds. Choosing out of using the hotel safe, Charles and Lucinda enter a room and engage in intimate moments. Their encounter takes a dark turn when an intruder bursts in, brandishing a gun. The assailant robs them, discovering their affair, leading to a tense situation. Charles attempts to intervene but is brutally beaten and left injured on the floor as the assailant rapes Lucinda, leaving a lasting impact on both their lives. Charles wakes up to find Lucinda sitting on the bed, visibly distressed. He apologizes and suggests calling the police, but Lucinda stops him, fearing her family might find out. They decide to leave the hotel quietly. Back home, Charles makes a story about getting mugged by his wife, Diane, who expresses her dislike for the city and urges him to return to teaching. Charles admits it won't cover their daughter's medication costs. Later, Charles receives a call from the assailant, LaRoche, demanding $20,000 and threatening to reveal the affair to Charles's family. Charles unwillingly agrees. Wanting to resolve the situation, Charles visits Lucinda at their workplace, proposing to involve the police, but Lucinda refuses, fearing the consequences for her family. She decides to end their relationship, leaving Charles stunned. Feeling the weight of judgment from a co-worker, Charles confronts the harsh reality of his actions. That night, he contemplates his savings and eventually decides to withdraw the money. The next day, Charles follows LaRoche's instructions, the man who plans the attack, meeting a man named Dexter who leads him to LaRoche. Charles hands over the money, and LaRoche, upset about his cancelled credit card, punches him. As November arrives, Charles shares a moment with Winston outside the office, who opens up about his troubled past. Charles then receives another call from LaRoche, demanding more money. Struggling, Charles reveals he has nothing left. To his shock, LaRoche hints at acquiring his new number and reveals their home phone number. Panicking, Charles rushes home to find LaRoche talking to his wife. Charles pretends LaRoche is a client needing a contract signed. Tension rises as Amy, Charles's daughter, enters. Distressed, Charles watches LaRoche kiss Amy. Interrupting the scene, Charles unwillingly signs the contract, only for LaRoche to demand $100,000 to leave them alone. The situation intensifies as LaRoche threatens Charles, leaving him in a difficult tight spot. Charles agrees to LaRoche's demands, leaving the location in tears. The following day, Charles consults with Jerry, his lawyer, who explains their inability to pursue LaRoche legally due to the lack of a police report. Jerry suggests that Lucinda coming forward is their best option, but Charles, despite informing Lucinda, faces her reluctance. Lucinda discloses she had an abortion after getting pregnant by LaRoche that same evening. Seeking advice, Charles turns to Winston, who proposes scaring off LaRoche for $10,000, reminding Charles of a past favor. Charles, initially hesitant, eventually agrees. LaRoche sends a note with details for the money exchange. Charles, along with Winston, arrives early at the location, providing the payment. Winston plans to intimidate LaRoche with an unloaded gun and hands Charles a makeshift knife he used in prison. A sudden noise startles them, and Winston collapses, shot by LaRoche, who takes the money and blames Charles before leaving. Charles, realizing Winston's knife is in his possession, wipes his fingerprints and escapes. Back at the office, Charles tells the accountant he spent $10,000 on a commercial spot. Meanwhile, Detective Franklin approaches, revealing he's Winston's uncle. Franklin questions Charles about his whereabouts the previous night, and the call from LaRoche interrupts them. LaRoche threatens Lucinda and demands $100,000 within 20 minutes, threatening Charles's family. Charles rushes to the bank, withdraws the money, and heads to Lucinda's supposed location. Inside, he finds Dexter pointing a gun at her. Charles hands over the money to LaRoche, who assures him they won't cross paths again. Lucinda apologizes for the use of the money meant for Charles's daughter's medicine. Charles, relieved that his family is safe, leaves. Detective Franklin later confronts Charles at a bar, questioning his alibi. Franklin invites Charles and Jerry to his office, issuing a veiled threat to the killer. One night, Deanna discovers Charles drinking and learns that their 7 years' worth of savings for Amy's medicine is gone. Charles confesses his actions, and Deanna breaks down, devastated by the loss. On the way to the detective's office, Charles decides to inform Lucinda first. He arrives at Avery Price, but the receptionist claims Lucinda resigned a week ago. Confused, Charles discovers the apartment was rented by a couple. When he returns to the station, he finds Lucinda, follows her, and is about to confront her when a man approaches and starts talking to her. Charles continues to follow Lucinda, observing her new interaction with LaRoche. Later, at a hotel, Charles checks in, and his lawyer informs him that if LaRoche is apprehended, the money won't be returned, as it becomes state evidence. Lucinda and her new victim, unknowingly observed by Charles, check in at the hotel. Dexter, posing as a security guard, hands money to the front desk. Charles, strategically positioned, runs to the top floor through the stairs, hides in his room, and prepares to confront LaRoche. When LaRoche arrives, Charles knocks him out with a lampstand and reveals Lucinda's scam. Lucinda denies involvement, but Charles explains their scam, exposing their deceptive encounters on trains. LaRoche wakes up, and a confrontation ensues. Lucinda urges LaRoche to return Charles's money, but he refuses. In the struggle, Lucinda gets accidentally shot by LaRoche. Dexter hears the gunshot and attempts to intervene, while LaRoche shoots her victim multiple times. Out of bullets, LaRoche tries to shoot Charles, but Dexter breaks in, and a fight ensues. Charles manages to obtain Dexter's gun and shoots LaRoche, and in the chaos, Dexter is also shot. When the police arrive, Charles claims to have heard gunshots and witnessed the security guard rushing towards the room, maintaining his innocence. Detective Franklin arrives, and the officers conclude it is a confused mugging scene. As the police empty the hotel safe, Charles finds his briefcase containing the money LaRoche and Lucinda took. The following day at work, Charles faces accusations from Elliot and the accountant for using the $10,000 designated for a commercial spot. Legal action is taken, and Charles chooses to pay it back while serving community service. In December, Charles teaches inmates at the prison, discovering a notebook detailing his story. The narrative leads him to the laundry room, where he encounters LaRoche. Charles, cornered, reveals he chose this prison and strikes using a makeshift knife, ultimately ending LaRoche's life. Upon leaving the prison, Charles encounters Detective Franklin, who questions him. Initially worried, Charles is relieved when Franklin implies leniency due to Winston's demise. Charles returns home to his wife and a healthier-looking Amy, signaling a fresh start.